Hi guys, welcome back. I just want to start today with something that I learned from the previous lesson when I'd opened up the 10mm ammo box with the new archive browser, and of course I came up here and I closed it down. And at this point I was very confused because no matter what I did, I couldn't seem to open any more BA2 files. It just didn't seem to work. Very simple fix. What you're gonna have to do if you end up in this position is go to View, Show, Archive Browser. That brings you back here. So keep that in mind, guys, that if you close it down up here, the way to get it back is to go Show, Archive Browser. Very simple. Let's get on with the lesson. Gonna be taking a look at the projector clamp, which is inside of Starlight Drive-In Video's main BA2. If you want to check it out for yourself, which I recommend that you do, you should study some of the default NIFs that come with the game. That'll help you a lot in order to decipher all this mess. But this is a very simple NIF, that's why we're looking at it. If we open it all up, it's only got 5 nodes here, so not a whole lot to work with. The root in this case is a Ni node. In the case of Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas, it used to be a BS fade node, but they've gone away from that and they're just using general Ni nodes now. If we hold our mouse cursor over it long enough, it'll bring up a little help window there. It says generic node object for grouping. It's a container where you place a bunch of other stuff, which we're going to look at right now. Firstly, it's got a name, MacClamp ASML01. We can change this to whatever we like by clicking on the text icon. Though a thing to keep in mind about renaming or adding names to nodes is this is the strings menu, and it stores that new string inside of the header. Down at the bottom of the header you got a strings section. Every time you rename or add a new name, it adds a new string to the string section. This can get quite messy quite quickly if you keep adding new strings to this area. So you might want to keep it clean, just a thought. Let's see, we got an extra data list, which is a BSX flags node named BSX. We don't have any controllers, but we got a flag. This is 14. I'm not entirely sure what this does, but you tend to have to keep it the same across the board with the Ni nodes, and I think it changes depending on the game that you're working with, whether it's Skyrim or older than that. In the case of Fallout 4, it's supposed to be 14, so you want to keep it at that. And yeah, I don't have anything more to say about the flags. You just want to make sure that you set it. We got a position, rotation, and scale numbers here. Generally, you don't so much change these on the root. I've found that when I do this, sometimes it doesn't take effect in game. You want to change it either on the meshes or on a Ni node that has a group of meshes that is a child of the root. Let's see, we got no collision on this mesh, and we got one child, which is the mesh itself. So if we take a look at the next node down, which is BSX flags, usually always has to be named BSX, so make sure this is the case. It's got a number of 128 at the moment. This number can be a little bit confusing. If we open up the flag section here, you'll notice it's completely different to before. And we got nothing ticked because we got no havoc, no collision, no skeleton, no animations, no flame nodes, and no editor markers. But if we tick some of these, that'll of course change the number. But what's kind of funny about this is if we say go down to 64, right? These numbers are pretty common to anybody who uses computers. 32, 64, 128, 256, and so on and so forth. Now you'll see these are all empty as well. If I change them, now it bumps it up to 90. And if we go down to say 32, up, we got one ticked by default. That's weird. Usually they're all unticked. See? This is weird. But we won't worry about that. We'll just leave it at 128. A bit confusing. Let's see. We got the mesh node itself, which has a name similar to the root with a colon and 0. This tends to be Bethesda's naming convention. They'll just have the name of the root and then they'll go up by numbers incrementally. See, here we can change the translation if we want. Let's see what we have down here. We got a properties section. This is important. We got two properties. I don't know why that is, but one of them's empty. And the other one is the shader property up here. Its name is actually the file path to the material that it's sourcing. Now in the past, Fallout 3, New Vegas, you used to have individual nodes for materials, but since Bethesda started to use actual material files, that's kind of gone away. And the way you plug it in now is you name your shader property with the file path of the material. It's a bit strange, but whatever. Best not to question it sometimes. Down here we got some vertex data, which I showed you last time when we went to vertex mode, and we can come down here and change the position of the vertices if we want. Not going to worry about triangles because that gets a bit confusing with all the weird numbers. And yeah, so let's move on to shader properties. Now there's two types of shaders that you'll commonly see in Fallout 4. There's a lighting shader, which this mesh uses. What that means is it receives light and shadows. There's also an effect shader, which does not receive light and shadow. And that's basically the major difference between the two. Lighting shader is used for static objects and stuff like that. Effect shader is used for effects like explosions and particles. We'll take a look at one of those in a second. I think the note about this one, obviously, as I said, you plug the material into the name slot, the file path to the material. You got a bunch of shader flags down here which need to be set correctly. I believe it could crash your game if you got these two set up incorrectly. So pay attention to how these are set up in some of the vanilla meshes. And if you copy that, or an even better way to do it is to get your vanilla mesh, get its shader property, and then right click it and go block copy, and then paste over your shader property, so you get all the everything set up correctly. Let's see what else. Some of this stuff we're not really going to cover because it's stuff you should explore yourself, like the alpha, which controls opacity, glossiness, which controls specularity, specular color, specular strength, and so on and so forth. Emissive can be a bit like a glow. If you want to quickly add a glow to your whole object, you can play around with the emissive color and multiplier. And yeah, this mesh also has a texture set, which I'm a little bit confused about, but I found this in a lot of the default NIFs. Even though it's got a material file, it also has this texture set, which has all the file paths to the DDS files, which is what I assume would also be in the material file, but apparently it also uses this texture set. I don't really know what's going on there, whether this is just like leftovers. Could be. So let's take a look at that other shader property, and we're going to do that by opening up a new copy of NifSkope. Here's something to note, that you can actually have multiple copies of NifSkope running at the same time. It can be quite handy. I tend to work this way when I work. And that way you can copy between the files. Again, I didn't have my archive browser open. Gotta make sure that thing's up. So we'll open up the projector end glow, This has a mesh in it which uses an effect shader property. So if I just drag this over here and we can compare the two, you'll see they're quite similar. Few things down the bottom of the lighting shader are missing in the effect shader, but otherwise they look fairly similar. We still got our shader flags. In the case of this NIF I just opened, shader flags are set up quite simply because I need it to be an emissive white color. So I'm doing that by using a source texture, which is just a white texture, and then using the emissive color and emissive multiplier to give it a glow. So let's copy this. Actually, let's copy the entire mesh by right-clicking on it, going block, copy branch, and then we'll paste it. Paste at end. Now, if you saved this, by the way, the mesh is there, you just can't really see it. But if you save this and try to open it up in game, chances are your game's going to crash because you have two root nodes, which is a bit funky. We don't want that. We want to plug this into the root node as a child. There is two ways you can do this, and I'm going to show you both of them. So in order to do that, I gotta extend the children to 3. Then I'll right click down below where there's 2 green arrows and I'll go array update. Now you'll notice they grayed out. So what we're gonna have to do is come up here and go save as, and then we'll save it in our meshes folder. And now it gives me those 2 slots. The first method of doing this is if you've already pasted a node in here, then you can just enter the number that it has, 5 in this case, and that'll add it as a child. Or you could click on the empty slot and you right click and go block paste branch, and that'll paste it in like so. You might notice something strange here if you've got an observant eye, and that is that these 2 nodes that we copied in have the old name of the root, which used to be Mac Clamp ASML01. That is because when you copy nodes between 2 different NIF files, it doesn't copy the name. You'll see if we take a look at our header, it's not added any new names here. This node is supposed to be called Projectolite. And this is where things can really screw up if you're copying nodes around. You want to make sure the names are all set up correctly. So I'm just going to name this Projectolite, and then I'll get down here and name it this one Projectolite 2. Like so. Anyway, that's the proper way to copy nodes between different NIF files, and as long as you pay attention to the names, you'll be alright. So we didn't cover like collision or any of the animation nodes in this. I want to save that for other lessons. Just wanted to keep it simple for this one and not confuse you too much, because as we discovered in the first lesson, there's a hell of a lot of nodes in here. So we don't want to get too confused by all that. And hopefully this has given you an insight into what makes up a NIF file. Next lesson we'll take a look at animation nodes and putting together a simple animation just within NifSkope itself, not using any external 3D applications or anything like that. So I hope you tune in for that, and if you liked the video, leave a like. Maybe subscribe to the channel if you want to support it and help it to grow. And if you really want to support it, maybe spread the word around. I'd really appreciate that. So I'll talk to you later, guys. See ya.